My boyfriend kicked my 5-year-old son after his dog gave my son stitches. That man lost his dog, his girlfriend, and his house in the same week. I was a single mom for 3 years before I met Wendell. My son Cody was 2 when his dad walked out, and I raised him alone working reception at a vet clinic during the day and catering shifts on weekends. Cody was the easiest kid. Quiet, sweet. He said please and thank you before he could pronounce them right. He shared his snacks with strangers at the park without being asked. I met Wendell through a friend of a friend at a barbecue. He was tall and calm and spoke slowly, like he weighed every word before he said it. He brought his dog everywhere, a 70-pound pit mix named Duke who was untrained and unfriendly, but Wendell treated him like his firstborn child. Treats in his pocket, sleeping on his bed, Duke's name tattooed on his forearm. I asked Wendell on our second date if Duke was good with kids. He said Duke was great with everybody. That was a lie, and I didn't find out until it was too late. The first time Cody met Duke, the dog growled at him. Cody was 3, standing 4 feet away, not moving, not reaching, just standing there, and Duke growled low and mean. I told Wendell the dog didn't seem comfortable. He told me Duke just needed time to warm up. He said it like I was being unreasonable for worrying about a 70-pound dog growling at a toddler. Every time we visited Wendell's place, Duke followed Cody around the house and stood too close, and Cody would freeze because even at 3 he knew something was wrong with that dog. I asked Wendell to keep Duke in another room when Cody was over. He refused, said he wasn't going to lock up his dog in his own house for a kid who needed to learn how to be around animals. Cody was 3. He needed to learn how to be around animals. That's what Wendell said about a toddler. But I stayed because Wendell was good to me when Duke wasn't in the room. He fixed things around my apartment. He cooked on Sundays. He talked about us moving in together. And I wanted that stability for Cody because I was tired of doing everything alone. 6 months in, I let Wendell move in with us. Duke came too. I set up a baby gate in the hallway so Duke couldn't reach Cody's room. Wendell took it down the first night and said it made Duke anxious. A baby gate made a 70-pound dog anxious. I put it back up the next morning and told him it was staying. He took it down again while I was at work. Cody told me Duke had come into his room while he was napping. I came home and put the gate up a 3rd time and told Wendell if he touched it once more we were going to have a problem. He left it after that, but every time he walked past it he shook his head like I was being ridiculous. Then it happened. Cody was on the living room floor playing with his blocks. I was at the stove making dinner. Wendell was on the couch watching a game with Duke beside him. Cody reached for a block that had rolled near the couch and Duke lunged off the cushion and bit him on the arm. Not a nip, a bite. Cody screamed so loud I dropped the pan I was holding and ran into the living room. My son was on the floor holding his arm, and there was blood coming through his fingers and he was shaking. He was 5 years old, shaking on the floor of his own living room because a dog that should never have been near him bit him hard enough to break skin. I grabbed him and pulled him to me and looked at Wendell. Wendell had Duke by the collar, and the first thing out of his mouth was that Cody must have startled him. My son was bleeding, and Wendell defended the dog. I told him to get Duke away from us right now. As Wendell pulled Duke past us toward the bedroom, Cody was crying hard, and his legs were kicking the way kids do when they're scared and hurt. His foot bumped against Duke's side, barely. The kind of contact that happens when a small child is flailing in panic. Wendell stopped walking. He looked down at my son, and he kicked him. He kicked a 5-year-old boy who was lying on the floor bleeding from a dog bite. He kicked him in the leg and told him not to touch his dog. I don't remember standing up. I remember being on my feet, my voice steady, even though everything inside me was on fire. I told him to get out of my apartment right now and take his dog with him. He told me I was making a bigger deal of it than it needed to be. He said Cody kicked Duke first. I told him again to get out. He grabbed Duke's leash and his keys and walked out the front door and slammed it hard enough to rattle the picture frames in the hallway. I sat on the floor with my arms around Cody for what felt like a long time before I could move. His shirt sleeve was soaked through. He kept saying he was sorry, like he had done something wrong, and I kept telling him no, baby, you didn't do anything. I wrapped a clean dish towel around his arm, grabbed my keys, and carried him to the car still in his socks. I took Cody to the emergency room. 4 stitches in his forearm. The nurse asked how it happened, and I told her a dog bit him. She asked if the dog was current on vaccinations. I called Wendell from the hospital parking lot and asked him for Duke's records. He told me to figure it out myself. The vet clinic I worked at handled it. My boss, Dr. Amaro, pulled Duke's file because Wendell had brought him in for shots the year before, and everything was current. She also saw the bite on Cody's arm when I brought him in the next day because I had nobody to watch him. She asked what happened. I told her everything, including the kick. She sat down and told me about the county's dangerous dog reporting process. I filed that same week. I changed the locks on my door that afternoon. Wendell had a key, and I wasn't waiting around for him to use it. He'd been texting me non-stop since he left, calling me dramatic, saying I was going to ruin his life over a little accident. I didn't respond to a single one. I had Cody's stitches and a county case number, and that was all the answer he was ever going to get from me. 2 days after I threw him out, Wendell showed up. It was 8 at night. I was in Cody's room reading him a story when I heard 3 hard knocks, then the sound of a key sliding into the lock and the click of it not turning. He tried it again. The knocking came back harder. Cody sat up in bed and his eyes went wide and he started crying. That quiet, scared cry where his chin shakes and he can't get the words out. I walked to the front door. I could hear Wendell breathing on the other side. Come on, open the door, he said. I live here. Half my stuff is still in there. You don't live here anymore, I said. I'll put your things outside tomorrow. His voice tightened. You can't just lock me out. I've been paying half the rent. I told him if he didn't leave I was calling the police. I had my phone in my hand already. He stepped back and said, "You're going to regret this." Then his footsteps went down the stairs. The next morning I told Dr. Amaro everything. She asked if Wendell was on the lease. He wasn't. He'd just moved in and started giving me cash for half the rent. No paper trail. She told me he had no legal standing, but I should document every contact, dates, times, what he said. So I did. I started a notes file on my phone and it never stopped growing. That afternoon the animal control officer called. They'd opened an investigation based on my report and the ER records. They needed to inspect Duke and look at Wendell's living situation. I gave her his number. I asked what happens if Duke is declared dangerous. She paused, then said, muzzling in public, a secure enclosure, or in severe cases, surrender. That night Wendell texted me twice. The first one said, "You called animal control on my dog? Are you serious? Duke didn't do anything anything wrong. That kid was in his space. The second said, I swear if anything happens to Duke because of you, I will never forgive you. I screenshotted both and added them to the file. That kid. That's how he described a 5-year-old sitting on the floor of his own living room playing with blocks. The next day, my friend Larissa came over with takeout. Cody pulled up his sleeve and showed her his stitches like a badge. He said, Duke was mean to me, and then Wendell was mean to me too. Just like that. Simple and honest. Larissa's jaw went tight. She waited until Cody was out of earshot, then said, tell me you're not thinking about letting him back. I said I wasn't. I was thinking about how to make sure he could never do this again. A few days later, the animal control officer called again. The inspection had not gone well for Wendell. He'd shown up late, argued with the officer the whole time, kept repeating the bite was not a big deal, and the kid provoked the dog. Duke wasn't neutered. No formal training records, no certifications, no obedience classes, nothing. When the officer asked about a secure enclosure, Wendell couldn't produce one. No crate, no fenced area, no setup that would keep Duke away from people if it came to that. The officer told me she'd noted everything, that Wendell's behavior during the visit was going straight into her report, and that she'd never had an owner argue with her this hard about the very basic safety of his own dog. The case was escalating. Around the same time, Wendell started running another play. He went back to the barbecue group telling them I was making things up, trying to get his dog put down out of spite. One of those guys, a man I barely knew, sent me a text out of nowhere asking what was going on. I didn't type a word back. I opened my photos and found the picture I'd taken of Cody's arm in the ER, blood still fresh, wound still open before they stitched it, and sent it to him. No caption, no explanation. He never replied. That weekend I boxed up everything Wendell had left behind. Hoodie, phone charger, razor, sneakers, 2 coffee mugs, a belt, a book he never finished, a framed photo of Duke as a puppy he kept on the nightstand. I carried 2 boxes down to the front step with a note saying to pick them up by end of day. Took a time-stamped photo. He came that evening, didn't knock, called, and left a voicemail instead. His voice was quiet and slow, the way it always was when he was trying to make you feel sorry for him. You're cold. After everything I did for you and your kid, this is how you treat me? I fixed your sink. I cooked for you every Sunday. And you throw me out over one bad moment. One bad moment. That's what he called kicking my bleeding child. I saved the voicemail and added it to the file. A couple of days later, Larissa told me something she'd heard through a friend of a friend. The guy Wendell was crashing with had a strict no pets clause in his lease. No dogs, no cats, nothing. And Wendell had brought Duke right in there anyway. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't tell animal control where he was staying. I didn't call the landlord. I just filed the information away. Wendell, being Wendell, was going to bring it down on himself because he could not stop making the same choices. Rules didn't apply to him. Baby gates didn't apply to him. Lease agreements didn't apply to him. The following week, Cody got his stitches out. The doctor was gentle. Cody sat in my lap and squeezed my hand really hard and looked away while they snipped the threads and pulled them through. Afterward, we sat in the car eating ice cream. Chocolate with sprinkles for him, vanilla for me. He looked at me with chocolate on his chin and said, is Wendell coming back? My hands tightened on the steering wheel even though we were parked. I said, no baby, he's not. Cody nodded slowly, then said, good. I didn't like how he talked to me. 5 years old. He didn't say he was scared of the dog. He didn't say he was scared of getting hurt again. He said he didn't like how Wendell talked to him because a 5-year-old knows the difference between someone who cares about him and someone who doesn't. He felt it every time Wendell told him to move, to be quiet, to stop bothering Duke. He felt it when Wendell kicked him on the floor. That night the phone rang. Number I didn't recognize. Area code I hadn't seen in 3 years. Something in the back of my brain twitched, and I picked up. Hey, it's Danny. I sat down hard on a chair. Cody's father. The man who told me he wasn't ready to be a dad and walked out with a duffel bag when Cody was 2. Hadn't spoken to him since. Not a call, not a text, not a birthday card for Cody, nothing. And now he was on my phone at 9:30 on a Tuesday. Some guy named Wendell called me, he said. Told me you were being crazy and trying to get his dog taken away. Asked me to talk some sense into you. I felt my whole body go cold and then hot. Wendell, who I never even told about Danny, had dug through old contacts to find the father of my child to recruit him against me. The nerve of it. The absolute nerve. And what did you say? I asked. Danny was quiet for a second. Then, I told him if any man kicked my son, I wouldn't be calling his ex for help. I'd be calling a lawyer. I just sat there holding the phone. He kept going. His voice was different than I remembered. Quieter. Less sure of itself. I have no right to say this, but I'm glad Cody has you. I left. You didn't. You're a good mom. All I said was, thank you. We hung up. Wendell had reached for the one person he thought would side against me. The deadbeat dad. The guy who left. And even Danny told him he was wrong. The next morning, Wendell texted again. Different tone. Can we talk? I miss you. I miss what we had. I know I messed up. Just give me a chance to fix it. I lay there and looked across the room at Cody eating cereal at the dining table, holding his spoon with his left hand because his right arm was still sore. The scar was fading from red to pink, but it was going to be there for a long time. I opened Wendell's contact and blocked his number. The next afternoon at work, my phone buzzed. Number I didn't know. Loud, angry voice. Wendell's friend. The couch he'd been crashing on. Wendell's landlord found out about Duke because animal control showed up at my apartment looking for his current address. Now my landlord is threatening to evict me. You did this. I leaned against the wall. I didn't tell animal control where Wendell was staying. They found him on their own. And if Wendell told you Duke was allowed there, he lied to you too. The line went quiet. He hung up. Wendell had moved into a no-pet apartment with a 70-pound pit mix and didn't tell his friend. Animal control tracked him there because that's what they do when they have an open case. Now his friend was about to lose his home because he trusted Wendell, just like I had. A few days later, the hearing notice came. A formal hearing on the dangerous dog investigation was scheduled for the following week. I was required to appear. So was Wendell. With the right to bring witnesses, make a statement, challenge the evidence, he could bring people willing to lie for him. I called Dr. Amaro. She couldn't come, surgeries that day, but she'd already submitted a written clinical statement to the county before I even asked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Wendell in the hearing room talking slow and reasonable, the panel nodding along. What if they believed him? What if they let Duke stay with him under some basic conditions, and then he moved in with some other woman who had kids and the whole thing happened again? What if next time it wasn't a forearm? What if next time it was a face? I sat up, opened the notes file, file and started organizing. Every entry by date, texts grouped together, voicemails in their own section, a summary at the top, Duke growling at Cody, the baby gate, the bite, the kick, the ER, the report, the texts, the door incident, the inspection, the lies. I typed until my thumbs were sore. Around 1 a.m., I put the phone down. I think I slept an hour before I heard Cody scream. I was on my feet before I was awake. He was sitting straight up in bed, eyes huge, chest heaving, tears down his face. I dropped to my knees and wrapped my arms around him. He pressed his face into my shoulder, and through the crying he said, "Duke was in my room again." I held him until his breathing slowed and he fell back asleep against me. I sat on his floor for another 20 minutes after that, watching him breathe in the glow from his nightlight. His arm was on top of the blanket, and I could see the scar, pink and thin and still so new. He was 5 years old, and he was having nightmares about a dog that had bitten him in his own living room. The dog was gone. Wendell was gone. The locks were changed. And the fear was still here, living inside my little boy and coming out at night when he couldn't control it. In the morning, I added one more entry to the file. Date, time, 2:14 a.m. And what Cody said, Duke was in my room again. The morning of the hearing, I dropped Cody with my neighbor Samara and drove to the county building with my folder on the passenger seat. 3 panel members at a long table. I sat near the front. 10 minutes later, Wendell walked in, buttoned down, tucked into clean jeans, hair combed, looking like he'd just come from a job interview. Behind him was the friend from the barbecue, the one I'd sent the ER photo to. He didn't look at me. The animal control officer went first. She walked through the file. Duke had displayed barrier aggression during the inspection, lunging and barking at the door when the officer arrived. No secure enclosure, no training documentation. Wendell had been uncooperative, late, dismissive. Based on the ER report and Dr. Amaro's written statement, the bite was being classified as unprovoked. The child was seated on the floor and made no aggressive contact with the dog prior to the bite. She sat down. Wendell stood. He did what Wendell always did. He spoke slowly. He picked his words. He said Duke had never bitten anyone before in his life. The bite was a one-time reaction to being startled. Cody had been playing rough near the dog. After the bite, he said Cody kicked Duke and he moved Cody's leg out of the way to protect the dog. He said I was exaggerating because I was upset about the breakup. His voice never got loud. His hands stayed at his sides. He sounded believable. He always sounded believable. Then his friend stood up and said Wendell was a great dog owner and Duke was friendly and well-behaved. He said it fast like he'd rehearsed it in the car. The panel listened with no expression. Then they looked at me. I stood up and opened my folder. I started at the beginning. The first time Duke growled at 3-year-old Cody. The baby gate Wendell kept taking down. The bite. I described Cody on the floor with blood coming through his fingers. Then I described the kick. I kept my voice level. My son was lying on the floor bleeding. He was 5 years old. His foot barely touched the dog, and Wendell kicked him. Not nudged. Kicked. And then told a bleeding 5-year-old not to touch his dog. I placed the ER photos on the table. I placed the screenshots of Wendell's texts beside them. The ones calling Cody that kid who was in his space. I placed Dr. Amaro's clinical statement on top. Unprovoked bite from a large breed dog. Not a defensive nip. A full bite that broke skin and tore into muscle on a child's forearm. I sat down. The room was quiet long enough that I could hear the air coming through the vent in the ceiling. I didn't look at Wendell. I looked at the panel members. The one in the center had her pen down. The one on the left was rereading the screenshot at the top of the stack. None of them moved for what felt like a full minute. Then one of the panel members looked past me at Wendell's friend. She asked him directly if he had ever seen Duke show aggression toward anyone. The friend froze. He looked at Wendell. Wendell looked back with his chin up like he was daring him to say the wrong thing. The friend looked away from Wendell and back at the panel. I mean, Duke did growl at my kid once, at a cookout. Wendell said it was nothing. Wendell turned in his chair so fast I heard it scrape the floor. His face went white. "What are you doing?" His voice cracked on the last word. The friend didn't answer. He stared at the floor. The panel members wrote something down. Wendell sat there with his mouth half open, hands gripping the chair, and for the first time since I met him, he had nothing to say. 30 minutes later, we were called back in. Duke was declared a dangerous animal under county code. 2 options: surrender Duke to animal control for a behavioral evaluation and rehoming to a certified handler with no children in the home, or comply with a strict confinement order, muzzling in all public spaces, a secure enclosure to county specs, liability insurance, no contact with any minors. The panel paused and looked at Wendell. He didn't speak. He didn't have a home. He didn't have insurance. He didn't have a yard. He didn't have an enclosure. He couldn't meet a single requirement, and everyone in the room knew it. 72 hours to surrender Duke or face criminal penalties. Wendell stood up. He looked at the panel. He looked at the floor. He walked out without saying a word to anyone. I drove home and called Larissa. He lost Duke. He lost me. The friend whose couch he was sleeping on is getting evicted because of him. All in 1 week. Larissa was quiet for a beat on the other end. Then she said, "Good." When I walked through the front door, Cody was at the dining table with Samara. Crayons spread everywhere across the surface and onto the chairs. He held up a drawing. Our apartment, the front door, the windows, 2 people. 1 tall, 1 small. No dog, no Wendell. I took the picture from him and put it on the fridge with a magnet right in the middle. The locks were new. The baby gate was still up. Cody slept through the night.